Hello Internet, Brinks here. As the thumbnail mentioned, today we're diving deep into one of the most assumed opinions out there, and that is, Brewmaster is one of the worst tanks out of the lot. You're a masochist if you like playing the tank that's this bad. First, let's define bad before we continue to have this conversation. Bad means not achieving an adequate standard. With that in mind, we can now look at Brewmaster through a more objective lens, rather than just echoing community memes. Well, it's true that the spec has seen some multiple buffs from Blizzard recently. So clearly they needed some help compared to the other tanks. But how did those buffs impact its current performance? Were these buffs enough? And is it now good enough to stand its ground compared to the other tanks? We're going to look at some real performance data. Check different performance metrics for both Mythic Plus and Raids to find out. And yes, we'll ask the important question. Does the Brewmaster need more love from the Blizzard devs? And if so, in what department? Let's dive straight in. If you read the forums, or seen some YouTube comments on my tank videos, you've probably seen takes like Brewmaster is the worst tank in the game, or only masochists play monks. These comments did get me thinking. So if this tank class is the lowest in the tier list, of course it's easy to say it's the worst tank in the game. It's pretty obvious it's the worst when it gets placed in the lowest tier spot on most lists. But what is it that this tier list is telling you? Or better yet, what does it not say? What key performance metrics did they look at to draw this conclusion? Was it just damage output or highest key done compared to population data? Was that all, or did they factor in more? Does this created perception fully match up with the actual performance? Let's dive in and unpack that. Let's start with Mythic Plus. I will put up the European tank population data on screen right now. This clearly shows that the Brewmaster is by far the least represented tank in Mythic Plus. But low population doesn't always mean low performance. So what's going on here? First, I would like to define performance, because it's more complex than just saying people are not playing it, so it must be bad. And of course, popularity and representation is important. I would place it in the lower end of the spectrum, as it doesn't always mean low power, but it can reflect perceived performance or an issue with the class. By far the most important is survivability. Is it self-sustaining? Can it take a lot of damage per second? Does it have an effective health pool to survive big hits? And how far can we push it to the max? Damage output factors in here next. As it's clear to everyone, the faster the mobs die or shorter the encounter is, the less damage you'll need to take. Next, utility. Does the class have other tools in its kit to facilitate a smoother run? Then you have the high-end ceiling, the outlier. How well does the tank skill in extreme content? And last, what's the ease of play? Will you be punished for small mistakes? And how complex is the rotation? All these attributes will factor in when choosing the best tank. And the results can be different in Mythic Plus compared to Raids, because we just saw that the Brewmaster is by far the least represented tank in Mythic Plus. But when checking Mythic raid passes, Brewmaster actually holds its own. DPS 1.5 million and a survivability of almost 93%, the highest of all tanks, and yet again the lowest popularity. Compare that to Blood Decays with 1.6 million DPS and 89% survivability, or Paladins with 1.5 million DPS and 89% survivability, and they are almost 25% played of all the tanks. Clearly Brewmaster proves that it can perform when it comes to this. The Monk may not be at the very top, but is definitely capable of keeping pace with the other tank specs. So damage and survivability aren't the only factors that determine a tank's value. In raids, raw toughness and reliability are often the main focus, but in Mythic Plus, tanks are expected to bring more to the table than just a sturdy defense and decent damage. I'll get into that next. But before we do, let's have a specific look at every tank class and see if we can find out what it is that makes them actually good. Guardian Druid saw some talent changes going into Season 2. Simplifying these changes, this resulted in Frenzied Regeneration being restricted to a higher cooldown, which leaves Guardian Druid lacking a bit in the self-healing department, like they had in Season 1. On top of that, Ursol's warding is generally not super useful. Players are incentivized to path away from it, which results in a lower damage build to make up for the longer cooldown on Frenzied Regen. As a result, Guardian Druid in a standard Mythic Plus build features one of the lowest damage profiles at the moment. This should be an easy fix for Blizzard, but I've not seen them address this at all lately. Utility wise, it has combat res, stampeding roar, has a passive group heal in After the Wildfire, an interrupt and a soothe, and that's about it. When Guardian Druids are doing well, you will see them grabbing huge packs, surviving these with ease, because of their huge health pool and self-healing. And to top that off, they will do a lot of damage. Well, it would be nice to see the Uber Bear on a 2-minute cooldown back in the meta, if you ask me. Protection Warrior saw quite a few changes going into the new season, with Rage being harder to generate, but Rage spenders generally becoming more powerful. The damage and their survivability is still very good, unless what they're fighting is not blockable or reflectable, or when it requires self-healing, especially against a low number of targets, but usually they can shield wall through it. However, certain mechanics that really demand self-sustain or immunities can be tough for the Protection Warrior. How does the Prot Warrior help the group? Intervene isn't really anything special, not that special that you would choose a warrior for that in your group. It doesn't have a combat res. It has a decent interrupt and shockwave to stun a group for 2 seconds. So basically it has nothing huge than just being strong and doing a lot of damage. And this is probably enough why it's placed above the Monk and the Guardian. Protection Paladins. Ruthless Council got hit with a huge nerf, going from 30% to a 15% cooldown reduction. These cooldown reductions are placed on some really important and helpful spells and helpful abilities. Divine Shield, Spell Warding, and even on Lay on Hands. All good utilities to have. Despite this nerf on the CDR, Protection Paladins is still one of the best tanks going into Season 2. It has competitive damage, and most importantly, it has all the group utility it had before. In Blessing of Spell Warden, Blessing of Protection, Lay on Hands, and even a combat res. Not to mention infinite interrupts with Avenger's Shield. So yeah, you can see why it's in the top tier. It has the complete package, utilities for days, and all the damage intake and output. The Blood Death Knight is one of the strongest tanks when played well. The biggest strength is their ability to stay alive without a healer, but this comes with a caveat. You need to be pretty good at it to survive. In this regard, the Blood Death Knight is a very rewarding tank. However, it's not a fast-paced tank, and misplays are a lot more punishing than with other tanks. The grips are very useful in some situations, and it has a combat res. That is just really nice to have. Looking at the tier lists, it's doing great in raids, but in keys not as much. The reason for this? In higher keys, it's at higher risk at getting one-shot by high damage packs. So yeah, you're probably only gonna see them in S tier in Mythic Plus when they are completely broken. Because Blizzard seems to have a hard time to get this tank to the sweet spot. The self-healing after getting damage is probably not helping in this regard. Utility-wise, you have a group pool, and a silence, and of course an interrupt and a combat res. Vengeance Demon Hunter saw massive buffs going into Season 2, with Demon Spikes getting 2 extra seconds of duration baseline, Cycle of Binding getting changed to be a 5 second of reduction per Sigil of Flame, but now not getting triggered from other sources, and Feed the Demon only needing 1 talent point, which opens up builds with free capstones, including Last Resort. On top of that, Adraki got a massive buff to Wounded Quarry. It did get a small nerf on the range silence not too long ago, making the 4-second silence now only last 2 seconds. Oftentimes, a Vengeance Demon Hunter would be doing equal damage to a DPS on priority targets. Vengeance Demon Hunters still provide Chaos Brands, increasing magic damage taken by 3%, which is really convenient for your casters in your group. Along with its incredible self-sustained, it stands as the best tank for survivability, damage and self-sustain, and then brings all the sigils to the table for more crowd control, by moving the pack, clearing them in one spot, stunning them and silencing them. All this combined is why they are put in S tier. You could say it has the complete package: gripping, stunning packs, fast mobility, insane damage and survivability. Brewmaster Monk is in a similar boat as the Protection Warrior. As a tank, it can survive most encounters, but it definitely requires that external healing. The Prot Warrior is probably a bit more tankier than the Monk, but then the Monk is a bit better on the self-healing. Nothing huge though, but the Monk has Celestial Fortune and Vivify to help out the healers a little. But like I said, this self-healing is nothing special to write home about, and damage-wise, they currently can keep up with the tanks, but nothing close to outperform the Demon Hunters or the Warriors, but doing a decent amount of damage nevertheless. They have good mobility, and Ring of Peace can come in handy sometimes with certain affixes. It's a shame that the Monk can't do a combat res. Seems legit to me if a Monk would be able to revive your soul back into your body after death. Especially when you can see that the Monk doesn't have much useful utility, besides an interrupt and a leg sweep. The Monk also has Tiger Lust to remove snares, and here it becomes clear to me. You can't have all the utilities that matches every current meta, you would say. But some tanks do have utility that is really convenient in every meta. For example, yes, removing snares can be very useful, but they're completely non-existent in this current meta. Having a group silence on the other hand is always handy to have. And here lies the imbalance. Even though it seems like all tanks have utilities to bring to the table, its usefulness in the meta is what makes it important. So in my opinion, here's where the brew really falls behind, in its utility. Like mentioned before, Blood Death Knights have Death Grip and Gorfin's Grasp for mob control. This even includes the silence these days. But the Mass Grip is extremely sufficient for a dungeon run, and they bring a combat rest to the table. Paladins brings interrupts, silences, off healing, blessings and immunities, and a combat res. Vengeance Demon Hunter has AoE silence, a ranged silence, and Sigil of Change to stack up all the mobs, and all sigils combined provide excellent mob control. It can control the mob so hard it doesn't even need a combat res. Mobs can't move and you can't die. Brewmaster on the other hand has Ring of Peace. Ring of Peace has its usage, and you can help your teammates and deal with some weakly affixes at times. But it really does have a niche usage. Leg Sweep is great for AoE stun, but it's very short. But you will definitely use it a lot more than Tiger's Lust. Paralysis is a single target CC, but again, not used that often. All decent, but nothing game changing in high key coordination. So, is Brewmaster bad right now? No, it's not bad, just decent, in achieving an adequate standard. I would say it's in the middle of the pack. It's holding its own spot, competing comfortable with Guardian Druid and Protection Warrior. It's got the highest survivability of all tanks in the raid. It has viable DPS. It can push 18s in Mythic Plus. But is it underplayed? For good reason. And is it lacking in utility compared to the others? I would say most definitely yes. When looking at the top performing tanks, it would be easy and fair to say give the Prop Warrior and the Brewmaster Monk a combat res. And some more AoE crowd control while you're at it. We have jumper cables to use for combat reses, obviously. Clearly it's not a class fantasy thing anymore. Even if all the tanks would have a combat res, the Monk would still need some more self-healing and a bit more damage throughput, just to be competitive compared to the other top tier tanks. So why is the Death Knight not top tier? Like I mentioned before, it's harder to play. This also counts for the Monk. It's harder to master. It's the mix of these things that makes it less played. Not that it's bad, or not able to perform, or not able to survive. It's the mix of harder to play, not the best self-healing, not the best utility, and not the best damage output. So why would you choose a class that's harder to play? And yes, in that regard you could say, you must be a masochist to choose it. Because you're putting yourself through all that pain and not getting anything in return. Well, here's where you're wrong. You do get something in return. You get to play the Monk. And the Monk is very unique in its playstyle. It has a fun way of active mitigating your incoming damage. And it has cool movability. The rotation has a cool combo style. And because of these things combined, it makes Brewmaster a niche pick for players. Players who enjoy high skill expression, tight and fast rotational gameplay, and don't mind missing some group utility. It's definitely not for everyone, but for those who master it, it's a strong and rewarding spec. And it's something else for you to play for when you have already played all the top tier tanks so much the past expansions. I would love for Blizzard to give it some more love and maybe even rethink its current position between the other tanks. I would prefer it if they would add some more utilities to tank who are lacking this, instead of them nerfing the utilities slightly of the top tier tanks, because this doesn't bring them to the same level. And I think if Blizzard would implement a few of these changes, the Monk would be considered more. So, what do you think? Are you playing Brewmaster this season, or are you sticking to one of the meta tanks? Will you try out the Monk once you reach your 3k goal on your Vengeance Demon Hunter? Drop a comment below, hit like if you enjoyed the breakdown, and don't forget to subscribe for more tank content. Thanks for watching, Brinks out.